Hey guys, in this video I'm going to demonstrate tinting your headlight using Vvivid's Light Smoke Hex Tint. Make it look like this to something like this. Alright, so getting started here, you can see that I've already pre-cut a amount of film, and all I'm doing is double checking and making sure that the sizing is good. I'm peeling off the backing paper from the film itself there, and I'm only peeling a part of it there with this particular film or with this headlight film. Any fingerprints that you get behind it on the adhesive side will show through because the film is transparent, as you can see. And so you want to make sure that you minimize the risk of getting fingerprints and other dirt and debris really behind the film on the adhesive side there. And so what I'm doing is I only peeled part of it off of the backing paper, and I'm anchoring down one side there to give my to hold onto the film onto the headlight surface itself, using my squeegee to lay it down nice and flat. That particular area is fairly easy to do. It's fairly flat, and you can just lay it down and anchor it really well. Now what I'm doing is I am pulling and stretching the film slightly across the surface or the face of that headlight there, creating those horizontal wrinkles, or fingers sometimes as people will call them, and that's totally fine. What happens with that is as you get those horizontal wrinkles, you can pull up as I'm doing or pull down depending on where you're at, and those wrinkles will go away. Creating that kind of tension as well, later on we'll show you, having those horizontal wrinkles or fingers, when you heat the film, it'll cause the film to shrink back a little bit because you have stretched it, and it will actually cause the film to hug underneath the bottom and top edges there. So what I'm doing here is at that bottom part there, I've already run into one of those little plastic kind of nubs that stick out on the headlight. Some headlights, mostly older generation cars, have these protrusions on the surface of the headlight. I think that's probably where they injected the plastic into the molding to make the casing of the headlight. Anyway, so what I got to do is make a relief cut on the basically on the surface of that nub, so that the film can lay around and over it and you can proceed on there. So what I'm doing is I've made a relief cut basically on top of that nub, and I'm working the film around that nub there. You notice I kind of use a circular motion around that nub to be able to do that and make sure that the film is all the way around the base of that nub. So once I've gotten past that, I'm continuing on with the same process as I showed you on that first part there, and I'm pulling across the surface of the headlight there. Again, if those nubs were not there, this would be extremely easy and very, very fast to do. As you can see, I've already run into another nub kind of up in the top side there, and that one's kind of a pain in the butt because it's really in the middle, or kind of in the surface of the headlight itself, whereas that first one is at the very bottom edge, so you can kind of cut a U-shape relief cut there and work that around. Here you have to be very careful and just poke a hole for all intents and purposes, so that the nub can basically poke through that hole, and you can work the film down and around that hole. And then what you'll do is you'll kind of work the film around it, just like I'm doing like that, and then trim away the excess as you get the film down and around that nub. So you can see that's what I'm doing in this particular process right now, is I'm just trying to work the film around that particular nub. And I'm going to cut away some of the backing paper here now because it's just getting in the way. I've laid down enough of the film, but I do want to protect as best as possible for now the rest of the film that is not being laid down at the moment, because I am spending some time to work on that nub, which makes this headlight more difficult than a typical one would be that doesn't have any kind of nub. Again, this headlight would be extremely easy to do if those little nubs or protrusions were not there. And you could probably lay this down in one quick shot, stretching across horizontally, not too much because you don't want to distort the pattern. But again, you want to work the material around that little protrusion there, and take your time, make it easy so that there's not any bubbles that form around, any wrinkles or creases there. And as I'm working the material down, you can see I'm adding a little bit more to the relief cut there so that the film can slide around or go down around the base of that nub there. And so you see I'm taking a little bit of time on working around that nub there. I've worked the film basically all the way down to the base of the nub where it meets the flat surface of the headlight. And so I'm just taking my knife and gently scoring the film around the base of the protrusion or the nub, and cutting those, peeling those pieces away. Once I get that set, or cut those pieces off, get a little bit there on the bottom. Continue to use your squeegee and kind of work it around in a circular fashion as you see me doing there, kind of a crescent motion around it, and make sure that the film is all the way down around the base and onto the flat surface of the headlight itself. Alright, and so now that I've made it past that nub and I'm satisfied that I've got the film down and around, and I've actually squeegeed a little bit past it so that I can anchor it down, continue to pull across the front of the headlight surface there, again horizontally, creating a horizontal wrinkles or fingers. And you can see I'm about to hit on the bottom side there another one of those protrusions. And so I'm basically setting the film up around it. You can see where I'm hitting it there, and then trying to make sure that I get the film as close to the base of that as possible, in preparation to kind of give it a cut, or to give it a cut, a relief cut, so that I can work the film, continue to work the film around it. What I'm doing there is I'm setting my squeegee up kind of as a block to give myself a slight amount of excess film, and cutting down the top of that protrusion there, and that creates a split in the film. And now by pushing like I'm doing there on both sides, the film will fall down and around onto the surface of the headlight, and then I can trim off the excess there around the base of the film itself, which in the end creates basically a U-shaped cut to fit the round shape of the base. So that's what I'm preparing to do here. I've got the film down, and so I'm going to trim off some of the excess on both sides of that split that I made. Left side there, and then just in a moment I'll be doing the right side, so peel that piece off and then come around to the other side to make a cut on the other side of the base. And before cutting, making sure that I've got the film laid down the way I want and properly, and then just carefully cutting. You don't want to cut too hard because you don't want to scratch things up. I know that's just a protrusion. And then any scratches on there you may not be too concerned about it compared to on the surface of the headlight itself. So now that I've got past it and squeegeed a little bit more, what I'm doing is I'm basically finishing up the film, or pulling the film around to completely cover the surface, the flat front surface of the headlamp. And so here you can see I'm using my finger to seal down the tint along the edge of the headlight surface there. I'm kind of working towards the top right corner there, and so I'm going to create a little relief cut there because the excess film is catching on the fender that's protruding over the headlight there. That way I can work the film nicely rounded around that top corner. That's basically a 3-point corner. Coming in from the left side there where my thumb is running up and down that horizontal part, the vertical part on the right, and then on the Z-axis, if you will, coming in from the fender side there. So there's a 3-point corner. You want to make sure you round that well. Along the top there you saw what I did was just basically smooth down along the edge using my finger, and I'm on the far left side, so I've got another 3-point corner there. So I'm going to try to work the film nicely around that. The grill is in the way. I could have easily removed the grill. I just didn't in this case. But what I'm doing there is rolling the film basically around the corner on that side there. I'm retracing all of the edges to make sure that everything is sealed down nicely. Now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the excess film that I don't need anymore. Yes, it is excess film, and it does seem a little bit wasteful, but you always want to have extra just in case. So I cut off that extra since I don't need it. Saved whatever's on that backing paper for maybe doing a small turn signal or a marker if you can for later. Now what I'm doing is I am making sure that I've got full coverage and going over the sides of the headlamp itself. There's a corner down there in the bottom right as well that I'm working towards, and so what I'm trying to do is make sure I've got that rounded nicely around the bottom corner there in preparation for cutting and trimming all around the headlamp. So what I'm going to do here is make a little relief cut to help me out with that corner and get the film down and around and to make it look nice, and in preparation for trimming along the sides. Now I'm not doing a full wrap of the headlamp itself, meaning I'm not going to fully wrap the top side there or fully wrap the side there. I'm just going to leave a little bit of excess because the signal casing that goes next to it is going to cover that. Now what I'm doing here, as you can see, is after I've laid it down on the side there, is I am by hand trimming it to create a nice straight line there. I'm comfortable doing that. The thing here that you want to make sure is you have a super sharp blade so that it cuts nicely and easily without putting any pressure really onto the surface of the film, without scratching the headlamp behind it. If you're not comfortable cutting freehand like that, you could use a product called knifeless tape ahead of time, where you get that set up and put it basically where you would want to cut it, and then once you wrap the film over it and get it all set up, you can just use the knifeless tape to cut the film. I do have a different video that shows knifeless tape will cut Vvivid's headlight film. So what I've done now is I've finished cutting that. I've done a little bit more setup around the other edges there, and I've gone to the left side there, created a relief cut to help me get that area set up so I can make a tab and work the film around the edges there. And I'm getting set up to make my cut across the top, and so you can see I'm doing that right now, and I'm freehanding it, and I'm comfortable doing that. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can use knifeless tape or have that laid down ahead of time, and then when you wrap your film over the top and get it set up, you can just pull the knifeless tape and it'll cut it nice and straight without any risk of cutting the headlamp underneath of it. If you look at how I'm cutting it, I'm going very slowly, and you can kind of see in my hands, I'm very, very lightly holding the knife itself. I'm hardly putting any pressure on it, and using a super sharp knife, just basically the tip, letting the knife do the work itself, and essentially scoring the film. Once I got to the corner there, you saw I kind of did a rolling motion as I went around the corner there to kind of round that off, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to round off the film that's there. Looks like I had a little wrinkle that I wasn't happy with, so I'm peeling it back up just a little bit so that I can fix that wrinkle out of there to round off the corner nicely. Again, when you close the hood, the top side you're not really going to see, and then on the right side there where the signal marker casing would be, that's going to be covered up as well, so you may or may not see any kind of wrinkles there. So all I'm doing is just trimming it up a little bit here, a little bit better, a little bit more nicely to make it look a little bit better. This is my personal car, so I'm okay with some of the not quite, if it's not quite 100%, but certainly for a customer's car, I would probably use the knifeless tape option, and two, make sure that it does look 100% good to go. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this video here is basically do that same process on the left side there where I'm at now, and then trim off the bottom as well. Alright, so I basically finished trimming up the bottom there, and so what I'm doing is double checking my work, particularly around those little protrusions and nubs, and I'm kind of just taking a look to trim off any excess on the around the base of the those protrusions there. And so you can see after I've done all that, laying it down, and you saw me break out the heat gun a couple times there to add a little bit of heat to help shrink some things around or make the film a little bit more pliable or malleable to work around corners and such. I'm just trimming off all those little extra edges and pieces to kind of make it look a little bit more flush and nice and tight around those particular protrusions there. Again, if those protrusions were not there, probably would have been done with this process probably about 5-10 minutes ago at least. But because they are there, they add a little bit of extra time. You got to be a little bit careful to work around and with those things. If you want to make it look nice, trimming off the excess pieces there. And so now the headlight is basically done. I'm just going to use the heat gun to kind of make sure everything is set. I'm putting on a wrap glove so that I can use that to help seal down the edges in particular. The wrap glove just helps your hand or your fingers slide along the vinyl a lot easier than your bare hand there. Heat will cause it to, this is a heat activated film. It's actually warm out, so it's set pretty well. But I'm going to heat the edges and then make sure it's pressed down nice and well, and then heat the surface of the headlamp itself to find any air bubbles that may be trapped. The heat will cause any air in a bubble to expand, and you'll be able to see it. Then you can press that down because it does have an air egress technology. So for all intents and purposes, this headlight is all the way done. After I finish post-heating it there a little bit, and you can see that it's got a nice hexagonal pattern to add a unique look to this tint job. If you liked this video, hopefully it was informative and instructional for you. Show you that it's fairly easy, given those little protrusions sticking out there, to be able to tint your headlamps. If you like this video, give it a like, a thumbs up, and then hit that subscribe button so that you get any notifications when I post new material. Thanks, guys.